So often we ask ourselves why we can't do something or why something isn't working out. But in coaching, asking ourselves what the opportunities are, who can we engage, what are we feeling, what are we thinking, can be so much more insightful and helpful. Join us today as we talk about getting curious. I Could Talk to You All Day is a podcast about what it means to be a leader while also being human. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz.
And I'm John Spears, and we coach executives and leaders just like you about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get the conversation started.
John Spears.
Lauren Lefkowitz.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I have noticed something about myself, which is that when I am greeting somebody, whether it's by name or just saying hello, that I tend to sing it.
Like Oprah.
Yeah. Like John Spears. Tell me 3 things that you're curious about out in the world.
Okay, one, I am really curious about how food was invented. Like not food, but like new types of food or like how someone learned how to like make bread. Just really like what happened or like putting different ingredients together. I think that's one. Number two, I am really curious about how languages were formed, like how that whole thing happened, I think is really interesting. How people have really long-term sustained relationships.
Now tell me 3 things that you're curious about yourself.
You're not playing this game? This is just a me game?
You first.
I am curious about the patterns that I have that I continue to exhibit after years and years and years. The second one might be closely aligned, but like my subconscious, I'm reading a lot of Carl Jung and I'm like, subconscious is like this whole thing. And I rarely ever remember my dreams, but I've been remembering them a lot more. So, um, I don't have a personal dream interpreter, so I've been going to ChatGPT to help interpret my dreams, which are so fascinating. It's pretty accurate. And the third thing that I am curious about myself would be something around my emotions. I think I've been feeling a lot more in tune with them, or they've been like percolating up, or they've been much stronger. I'm not sure what the deal is, but I'm really curious about what's happening in my internal world that's like causing either or some variation of this, of like more emotions, more intense emotions, more overwhelming emotions, but just like more stuff around that space.
Mm. What did you notice was similar or different about the things you are curious about out in the world and the things you're curious about related
I,
to you?
I am super curious. I think the thread is like how things came to be, like how things were invented or how things happened. I think all of my curious stuff was like, why is this happening? What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to give you my answers first,
Ooh.
which I did not pre-think about. I only pre-thought about the questions. And I'm pretty proud of myself for that because I usually would plan out my answers so that they would be graceful, but I'm not doing that. We're not here for grace. We're here for the real. So out in the world, I am curious about how dogs became such a central, like loving concept worldwide and why them,
hmm
right? Like, why didn't we pick, I don't know, raccoons? There are domesticated raccoons. What is it about dogs that made them, I want a raccoon now? But what is it about dogs that made them the desirable? And like, how did we get so lucky? Because I freaking love dogs. So that's one thing I think about. The second thing that I think about is what is it that is like in the air, in like non-verbal existence that allows people to be in a room full of 1,000 people and find each other, virtual or real. Like that feels like magic. When I meet somebody or when I hear about how people found each other and started a business together or wrote music together, I'm like, how? That's so like so fascinating to me. And then the third thing that I wonder about is, I mean, I wonder about a lot of things. I'm just sort of trying to narrow down. This one I feel like is so big that I can't even wrap my head quite around the question I want to ask. How the elements, earth, air, fire, water, impact all the things we do. And I don't know anything about astrology. Like I know a very little bit. I know a very little bit about human design. And I am fascinated, grand scale, by what all of that means. And also it feels overwhelming to figure out how to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Personally, my curiosity, similar to you, is about patterns. Like, where did my patterns come from? A little bit, who can I blame? And a little bit, like, how can I blame myself? Right?
Yeah, totally.
I'm being honest.
I love it.
Two is why I don't get more done and accomplish more. And three is why I'm so hard on myself. So the 2 and 3 are kind of tied and also have sort of their own independent processes. And I noticed the same thing, that like the curiosity out in the world is like, tell me more. How did we learn we could eat this kind of mushroom and not that kind of mushroom? And that kind of mushroom might be fun, but that kind of mushroom's always going to be disgusting and it's going to ruin your dish. Then I come to me and I shift from the how and what and where, like real curiosity, to why, which comes across to me as such a closed question, right? There's a why and there's a because, but curiosity doesn't build on why. And you and I learned in our coach training and before that, in all of the coaching that we'd done and all of the books that we'd read, that when you ask why, you get sort of a closed answer. You get a because, you get a reasons, you get excuses, and then you move on to fixing. Today, we're going to continue talking about coaching yourself because we could only touch the surface on our last episode about what coaching yourself can look like. We've decided to do a little series on coaching yourself.
I love a series.
I love a series. And so today we're going to focus on curiosity. And if you are as obsessed with our podcast as we are, you might remember that in season 1, we did a whole episode on curiosity. And you might think, hey, do you have amnesia? We do not. That episode was about getting curious at work, getting curious with your people, with your teams. Now we're talking in the self-coaching realm about how do you get curious about yourself and shift yourself from why to what and who and how and when. Who are my partners and how do I do it? So before we dive in, John, I want to reinforce the way you did on our last episode that we are not endorsing don't get a coach. Don't bother, not worth your time. Super worth your time. And all of the self-coaching techniques that I've learned, I've either learned from books or from my coaches or from peers who also are in coaching relationships. But I've learned to implement those things because I had that coaching support. So I can self-coach in ways that I wouldn't have been able to had I not also had coaching support and peer support from other coaches. So this is not an endorsement and a course on how to not have to have a coach. This is how to start getting curious about yourself, how to start on a path to noticing what's happening with you and starting to figure out like what could be.
Yeah. And I just want to add, I think this topic of coaching ourselves and self-coaching is super important because it's really challenging to do. And it's challenging, I think, as we mentioned before, because of our proximity to ourselves. When we're dealing with our own stuff, it is, it takes work and practice to be able to get some elevation, to be able to see things from an unbiased, kind of an observer's point of view, which is what happens in the coaching dynamic. And so having a coach, being asked the right questions, having that sort of community where this sort of alchemy happens between you and your coach really creates the learning, the knowledge, the experience to be able to bring some of those things into coaching yourself. So endorse everything you said, 100%. And also, it is the vehicle in my experience to be able to coach myself when I'm in a activated, triggered space as opposed to when I tried to before and just was completely unable because I just didn't have the familiarity. I couldn't navigate the space. I was too overwhelmed with my own stuff. And now learning how to regulate my own emotions and using some of the things that I've learned in coaching, not super easy, but a lot easier than it was before.
What is the benefit, John, of deciding to embrace a coaching yourself mindset?
I think a lot of things, but I think the thing that I have experienced myself is when I embraced this concept of being able to coach myself during challenging times, uh, it one helped me to be way more self-reliant. And two, I don't know if I'm like anyone else, but I am constantly getting triggered about stuff. Like big things, small things. There is constant amount of stimulus coming my way that elicits reaction or response depending on how much time I give it. And so it has been necessary for me to be able to embrace this so that I can live the way that I want to live in the world. And I don't continually act in this reactive state to whatever's happening. We call it in coaching at the effect of something, or sort of this like victim mentality. It's really given me the agency and the self-reliance to be able to navigate through some really, really challenging things alone when I don't have access to a community or to my coach to help process things.
I think something you and I talk about a lot in the at cause, at effect realm is a little bit of the what now,
Hmm.
right? So we talk about a victim mentality or a to me mentality, like what is happening to me. And there are absolutely times in our lives that we are victims of things. That is, I don't want to discount that at all. And there are many times when we don't choose what happens to us and something harmful happens to us. And also from there, we get to make choices and decide whether we want to stay with a thought process or a happening, or whether we want to make change. And if we need support on that, getting support. If we can do it ourselves, doing it ourselves. Can you talk, John, a little bit about how mindset, which is sort of a vague term I think we hear a lot about positivity, right? It's mindset tends to be attached to positivity when that's not necessarily really the point. But can you talk about a growth or learning mindset versus a fixed or defensive mindset a little bit?
Yeah. So I love this concept. Actually, I was introduced to this concept when my kids were in elementary school, and they gave everyone the book. I forgot the name of it, but it's called Mindset, and it talks about the distinction between what a fixed mindset is and what a growth mindset is. And basically, this fixed mindset is all about a way of thinking that says I can't grow. My past dictates my future. Um, this is too hard, so it must mean I can't do it. It's a really sort of constraining, limiting mindset. Whereas the growth mindset really talks about the fact that you're a learner and you're growing and you can improve things, that sort of your understanding of something or that your ability of something is able to progress and it can get stronger, and you can grow, and you can learn, you can grow more, you can be better, you can perform better. And so that's kind of that distinction. Sort of fixed is in place, it's very static, it's very limiting, and this growth mindset is all about learning, practice, the ability to grow in whatever it is you're talking about.
Yeah. I love that book too. It's Carol Dweck is the author, and it's
Yes.
called Mindset. And it has some repetition in it because you just told us what the whole book was in 5 sentences.
Wow.
And she does that sort of over and over, but in so many different ways that she keeps it interesting. There's a lot of storytelling in it. And by the time you get to the end, you really get it. And as a person who likes a concrete example, the example that I like to use is like what's fixed and growth opportunity for me physically, right? So I am a whopping 5'3¾" tall. Do not take away my 3/4, and it doesn't feel honest to say 5'4".
It does not feel honest.
To say 5'4"? No, I'm not 5'4". I'm 5'3¾". I'm not here to lie.
But what about
So
rounding up?
I, I don't know.
Come
Then what
on.
if I have to be that tall to get on a ride and they won't let me on because I'm not actually, when I get there, not actually 5'4".
Okay. Okay. I got it. I got it.
So yeah. Um, so on my person, that is fixed. I'm also not going to change like the size of my hands or the shade of pale and freckled I am, and all of that kind of stuff is static. It is fixed. It is not changeable. There are things about myself that I have decided are not changeable. So I have a fixed mindset, for example, on my eyesight. I don't want to get LASIK. I like how I look in glasses. I've gotten used to being a person who needs glasses. I'm probably a candidate for LASIK eye surgery. I don't want to. I'm going to probably keep wearing glasses anyway. So keep at it. And then there are the things that we cannot change, the things that we choose not to change, and then the things that we choose to change. I change my hair all the time. Sometimes it's been super short, sometimes it's been super long. It's been every shade of blonde, red, and brown that I can imagine. And it has also been purple. And for me, that's like a fun thing to play with and to keep growing on and to keep trying things on. And now I dye my eyebrows too because they're very blonde. And when I have red hair, I like to dye my eyebrows. I didn't used to do that. So
I
that's like
got
a new growth area for me.
that is a fun fact that I did not know.
It is a fun fact. So we have the opportunity in our lives and in our careers and in our workday to choose whether we live in growth or whether we live in a fixed place. And to me, the power is in deciding, am I cool with this being fixed and this being the way things are? Or do I want to grow? Do I want to change? And do I want to be checking in with myself? So when we're in this place where we have an opportunity to get curious with ourselves, and also we're living these very real lives where we are busy, and in our one of our last episodes, it might have been the last one, you were talking about having back-to-back meetings and a hard stop on our call, and it was one of those days that doesn't happen quite as often anymore. But we get that. I mean, we both have lived that for years and years. Where do you find the space? Let's start there. Where do you find the space to get curious when your whole day is go, go, go?
So one is, I think we need to create that space. Whether you're coaching yourself or not, having back-to-back meetings all day, every day is probably not a healthy thing. Um, it's too much. I'm talking to a friend who started a new job, and his company has back-to-back meetings every day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And he's like, when do I do work? When do I actually do this job that I'm supposed to do? And so I would say space is never going to be given to you for the most part. It's really up to us to do two things. One is to create the space, and the other component is to slow down so that when you have the space, you're not going from like 100 miles an hour to like five. And so I think that's something, regardless of what your profession is, what you're doing, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you have run a big company, whether you're a manager, whatever it is, slowing down and creating the space are so important to live the kind of intentional life where you're able to show up the way you want to show up on a regular basis.
Let's imagine that we have figured out when we are in a moment and we're feeling some kind of way. And our normal MO is to just go and do and fix it and be reactive. And we have chosen to get curious with ourselves. How can you remind yourself in the moment or in the day that that's a commitment you've made to yourself?
I think two ways. One is I think visual displays or reminders on our phone are a really great way to bring us back to things that are important to us. I would consider myself a really thoughtful person, but I create structures in my life to help remember things. So I have people's birthdays on my calendar. I have alarms on my phone. I put to-dos on my calendar so I don't forget to do things that I think are really important. And so I would say one is whatever that visual display is, whether it's in a calendar or there are habit trackers or there are timers that you can set on your phone to kind of ask yourself this question. That's one. The second thing is I think it's also really important as we're thinking about this question, and I think we've definitely talked about this before, to think about when we check in with ourselves, checking in on three areas. The first is what's happening in my body? Am I loose? Am I tight? Is there constriction? Where's their tension? Like what's happening? Do I have a stomach ache? Do I have a headache? Am I walking around with my shoulders up by my ear? So sort of examining that I think is super important to really give us clues to what's happening. If you're like, oh my God, I'm totally like not stressed and your like shoulders are up by your ears, probably a sign that's not the case. So that's like one way to do it. The second is what emotions are present? Like what am I feeling? And then the third is what thoughts are going through my mind. And so I think stopping to do a 30-second check. What's happening in my body? What emotions am I feeling? What thoughts are going through my mind is those can be really helpful barometers of where we are and where we might need to focus on coaching ourselves or taking a little bit of a break or kind of going deeper in some inquiry.
Yeah. I notice for myself that when I'm in full reaction mode, I do that thing that we do where we think, oh, I gotta get the chicken out of the oven, and we start walking towards there. And then we think, well, as long as I'm going downstairs, I may as well grab the laundry to bring downstairs. And then we get to the bedroom to pick up the laundry and we think, oh, I need to change my sheets. I'll do that before I bring the laundry downstairs. And then an hour later, we've put up decor in the bathroom, right? So when I am super busy, my MO is not to get curious.
Mm,
It's instead to handle everything, which means I don't handle anything. And for me, those three things are super important. And the power is in the pause.
mhm,
And the pause comes from what you just said are all of the ways. And everybody's going to have different ways, whether that's whiteboards or post-it notes or alarms on your phone or a commitment to text a friend, right? Coaching yourself doesn't have to be all by yourself,
mhm.
but coaching yourself can include accountability. If those things are not in my face, then by the late afternoon, I will have re-roofed my house. And I will have forgotten that I was going to send a document to someone I needed to send a
Right.
document to.
Yeah.
In my meeting to meeting to meeting life, I didn't feel like I had time to get curious. So part of the training in making space for that was the pause.
Yeah.
The pause to look at the wall where I had the post-it note up, or the pause to look on my phone for a list of things that I could do to take things down a notch. So let's imagine that you are in a moment. You're leaving a meeting, you're on your way to a meeting, you have 400 things to do, and you feel that feeling. You feel that overwhelm, tightening in your throat, your shoulders going up to your ears, all of those kinds of things that happen that put us in that reactivity tailspin.
Mm-hmm.
But you, John, have figured out your way to notice that you're allowed to self-coach. So you see your post-it on the wall or your iPhone cover page and lock screen. I just
Lock
I
screen,
just
yeah.
sounded like 400 years old. You know, the page that's the cover that sometimes goes away when you open the phone. Anyway, um, so you've got your way, you've got your trigger to notice that you can get curious
Yeah.
and you're in this overwhelm. What are the questions you can ask yourself?
Can I tell you first, the thing that always brings me back to being able to coach myself is breath. I've noticed that when I am busy or frantic and running from one thing to the next, and my mind is racing, that I'm oftentimes not breathing or not breathing properly, or I'm sort of shallow breathing or breathing in my chest. And so, in order for me to ask myself the question I'm going to say in a second, I need to calm the F down. I need to sort of stop the racing and slow everything down. And even it's so crazy that even when I say slow down, I actually slow down. Like even just saying the word slow down does something to my body where it's like, oh, reminder, stop talking 50 miles an hour and be chill a little bit. And so when I'm in that frantic meeting to meeting, a million things rushing through my mind, I always check to see how my breath is because if I'm not breathing right, I'm just not going to be able to like tap into what's happening in my body because everything feels so frazzled. So that's number one. And then the question is I ask myself is like, what's going on here? What's happening here? What's happening again? And I like to think about it in those three dimensions of my body, my emotions, and my thoughts. I think those are really good indicators of how we're doing or where we're at. And just by asking that question, it helps me to locate myself. And I think locating ourselves and identifying where we are is the first, that awareness is actually the first real step into diving deeper to figure out what's going on. Okay, I'm feeling really tense right now. Okay, what's behind that? What's going on? What thoughts are you having? What emotions are you having? Okay, there's fear there. Where is that coming from? What are you afraid of? And so the curiosity, like there aren't a set of questions that I ask myself, but the first one is like, what's going on? Because
Mhm.
that sort of opens the door to a million other questions. And I try to follow that till I get kind of to the root of whatever it is, which then really helps to shift my perspective and my context and how I'm viewing doing something. How about you?
I love that. As you were talking, I was breathing, which by the way, you can do anywhere. Um, and I noticed as you were talking about breathing, I do this thing, and I know that I do it in awake time and in sleep time because I once had a sleep study and it was not sleep apnea, and yet I stopped breathing 14 times during the night. I didn't have the inability to breathe. I was holding my breath. And people who live in high stress or have anxiety or have ADHD have a tendency to hold their breath or breathe in a really shallow way. And I noticed as you were talking about breathing that I hadn't been breathing. So I got curious and I thought, what kind of breathing can I do quietly without, an om on the way out that is going to make me feel better and is not going to be disruptive? And I chose just counting in four, counting out four, which basically took no effort. And I didn't have to remember the box of box breathing, which is for the same count in, hold, out, hold. And I didn't have to count in, differing numbers. I just in for 4, out for 4 until it was my turn to speak again. And thank you for that because it helped me.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that I think about with curiosity is like, what have I seen other people do who are curious people? I have a client who her whole thing is coming from curiosity. She's also very good at beating herself up, as all of my high achieving clients are. And I've talked about her before on this podcast as well. Once she has downloaded all of the ick, she is great at getting curious about like, what now? How can I move forward from this? What are my choices? And I think that we have the opportunity to stay in the same thought patterns over and over because there are defaults and they're what we know. And we have the opportunity in almost every moment, unless there is literally something on fire, to say to ourselves, what are my choices?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a million questions to ask yourself. We talked at the top of the podcast about choosing what or how over why, because why tends to result in self-blame, right? Why am I like this? What's wrong with me, right? What's wrong with me is why am I like this?
Yeah,
it's not what's wrong with me is not curiosity. And we have this opportunity, I think, to get really thoughtful about in this moment, what can I choose? So I'm going to leave everyone with an exercise as we're coming to the end of our episode already. And I would love it if you had a question that our audience might consider as they're starting to delve into curiosity. But I love the question, what are my choices right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I love answering that question in a playful way. Right now, in this moment, I could jump off this call with you and slide down the roof that's outside my window. I'm not gonna, but I could. I could also go to my next call, which is happening in just a moment. I could also call somebody. I could also change out the light fixtures in my house. But opening your brain to not necessarily realistic things is an option.
Yeah.
How about you?
I love that. I would say a question you should consider is the question I mentioned before, like what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you're going to get the actual reality of what's going on here, but it helps open the door for exploration to see what's present. And the reason I love that is because oftentimes for me, the first thing that comes up is some like crazy narrative and story that I'm telling myself about something. And it helps me to deconstruct that to get to what's really beneath it all. And so I love that question as an opener that then just opens the door to a number of different questions that help me to identify what the real thing is here.
Amazing. I'm so excited to keep talking to you about this because I could talk to you all day.
All day.
But it's time to end the episode. Thank you all so much for being here with us, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Thanks so much for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at icouldtalktoyouallday@gmail.com with your comments, questions, and topic requests. And subscribe so you don't miss an episode.